Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on owlscoop.com. You already know.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, owlscoop.com's podcast, Season 7, Episode 25, the Jeremiah Williams episode.
That's a good one.
I'm John DeCarlo, joined by Kyle Gauss, Sam Cohn, and Dante Colinelli. What's going on, guys?
I'm just beyond thrilled. I'm going to be honest, I think this is one of our better episodes. I mean, every episode I think is fantastic, but this episode has some good stuff. So I'm excited.
This is a good one. Yeah, this is jam-packed. Very exciting.
So yeah, some are calling it a jam-packed episode.
Some.
Who
are those some?
Some are. I keep my ear
the
close
people,
to the streets.
The people, John. The people are calling it. Yes.
Keeping my ear very close to the streets on this one.
So we got the highlight of this episode is going to be an excerpt from our interview with Temple football coach Stan Drayton. What you're going to be hearing here in a few minutes is basically like the first part of our interview was Stan. He did talk about his two newest hires, Jafar Williams at wide receivers coach, and then Marvin Clessidor at safeties coach. If you've been following along, Thad Ward was with Temple through signing day, and then he left to take a job at Kansas State. Then Ola Adams, who had been hired from Villanova, left for a position with the Broncos. So Stan was able to talk to us about his two most recent hires. And a lot of this is around his early life, growing up in Cleveland, what got him into coaching, and a great anecdote about how he met his wife and all the I mean, there's a plot twist there in terms of the story of how they got together, how he proposed to her, and some rapid fire questions there about his favorite song, favorite food, first concert, some fun stuff there. And then if you are an owlscoop.com subscriber, which we hope you are, and if you aren't, you should subscribe soon, because the bulk of our conversation is going to be on the site in the coming days for subscribers. And that includes stuff about a lot more detailed stuff about, his coaching staff, his philosophy on how much they're going to be hitting and tackling in practice, whether or not they're keeping the single digit tradition, all sorts of good stuff. So a really good conversation there. We will be talking near the end of the pod about some basketball. Just a programming note here. We are recording this on Wednesday before Temple hosts SMU for a 9 p.m. late tip-off at the Liacouras Center. So, but we will talk a little bit of hoops. We got a few basketball mailbag questions for you at the end of the podcast. But what we're going to do is play the first part of this Stan Drayton interview. Again, this is him talking about just his early life, some of his earliest football memories, what got him into coaching, and then we will react to this on the other side. All right, so we are thrilled to have with us on the Scoop this week on the Owl Scoop podcast, none other than Temple's new head football coach, Stan Drayton. Stan, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm doing phenomenal. How about you guys?
Doing well, hanging in. Can't
Good.
Doing
Good.
Stan, before we get into some of the other questions, I know this is part of the process. This happens in college football. You hire new guys, and then sometimes things move around, and Thad Ward moved along, Ola Adams moved along, and it kind of speaks to the quality of coaches that they are. And then to replace them, you brought in two other assistant coaches, in Jafar Williams and Marvin Clessidor. And I was hoping you could talk to us about those guys and what the whole process is like when you're just piecing all this together, in addition to a new recruiting class as well.
Yeah, that whole process, I mean, it's tough in the very beginning. You try to go and get the best fit, for Temple, for your athletes, for your philosophy, right? And here they have to have some type of connection to the footprint, our recruiting footprint here in the Northeast. And I thought I hit a home run with both Ola and Thad being retained. Already had a real feel for Temple University and the players that were currently on the team. So to lose those guys, it's tough. It's tough to go find new guys. But I think we did a phenomenal job. Holding true to our philosophy. Still getting some guys who are very familiar with the Northeast. Obviously, Jafar Williams, a guy who played at Maryland and is coached at Virginia Tech and originally from Philly, northeast of Philly. And so, to be able to land a quality coach that's got Power 5 experience and has also played the position of which he's coaching was a blessing. I tell you what, it's hard to find good coaches, guys. I mean, that's the one thing. And then, it seems as though, when you do find those guys, everybody else is scouring for them as well. Everybody's trying to go and hire and get the same guy. But, very lucky he had some other opportunities, Jafar did, and he chose Temple. And that's ultimately what it is. Here at Temple, you got to want to be here, right? I mean, you got to have a special place in your heart. His mom still lives here, so it's really a really great fit for him as it is for us as well. And then Marvin Clesador, a guy who played at Lafayette, although he's originally from Florida, but again, when you talk about the footprint, then you talk about our secondary recruiting areas, right? Which we got to go down into Florida and pluck a few of those players from down there. He was an awesome fit. I've heard so many great things about his competence level as a DB coach. He's coached all over the back end. He's actually had the whole back end before. He has some prior relationships with some guys on our staff now, and they spoke highly of him in the interview. He just blew DJ Elliott and myself out the water. I mean, his knowledge of the game, his energy that he brings to the table, and his want to be here at Temple. Again, you're looking for guys who want to be there, and there was no hesitation in his whole thought process and the words that he used within his interview that he wanted to be here at Temple. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity. He was ready to take on this challenge. So again, feel very, very blessed, somewhat lucky too, right? That those guys were available. But most importantly, that they wanted to be here and they were absolutely built for this philosophy and this program. So extremely excited for those two guys.
Stan, I wanted to go way back here to the beginning of your life, and you're from Cleveland. You grew up there. Do you remember like what your first, like, or your earliest football memory was of the game? What got you into the game? I mean, there are all sorts of different types of like ways that people get into coaching, and some people get into it later or earlier. But do you remember what your first memory of the game was that turned you on to football?
Yeah, I do. I actually grew up on the east side of Cleveland and grew across the street from a park, a recreation park, and they would have probably 3 or 4 Pop Warner teams on that field practicing. So every day I would sit there and watch those guys practice, and we didn't have the money. I could not afford it. My mom couldn't afford paying for me to join those teams, but just watching those guys out there every single day practicing, and they were my friends. I mean, I was just absolutely jealous that I couldn't be out there. So while they were out there practicing, I would grab a football and just kind of move some furniture around and just kind of play running back in the living room and, let the couch tackle me every now and again, not all the time, you know what I mean? But just kind of run around as they were practicing, just visualize me playing this game. And at the time, Walter Payton was my favorite player. And, so there's times where I would even hurdle those couches, and do things like that. But that was my first memory of me falling in love with the game, and then not having the opportunity to play it was heartbreaking for me, but the one thing that was a lot less expensive was running track, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I ran track in the off season, and the good thing to that was, a lot of those guys who were on those Pop Warner teams, when the season was over, they were running track. So I still was able to engage with those guys, but I didn't really get a chance to play football until my sophomore year in high school. That was my first time putting on a helmet. And again, it was the same guys that I grew up with. They were far more advanced. Oh, take that back. My first time playing football was in junior high school. How about this? Whitney Young Junior High School, and it was all flag football at that point. And I joined the team late, okay? And that was because I was really insecure about myself. Those guys have been playing football for years at this point, and so I joined the team as a punter, okay? And so I would just punt for our flag football team. All right. And it wasn't really until I put a helmet on the first time my sophomore year, and a guy by the name of Al Valancisi, who was the head coach at John Marshall High School, was just walking around the school recruiting. You know what I mean? And at the same time, a guy by the name of Coach Elkins was a wrestling coach walking around the high school recruiting. And they both kind of hit me on the same day and said, hey, you're either going to wrestle or you're going to play football. And I didn't really like the whole concept of being rolled up and somebody all, you know, bending me up all over the place on the wrestling match, you know. So I figured, hey, you know, maybe I can take out some of this aggression, you know, on somebody else on the football field. Had no idea what I was doing, but it was the camaraderie, you know, the feeling of a team, you know, that I really hadn't felt before. You don't feel that, you know, in track and field. It's more of an individualized, you know, feeling, you know. But you know, Al Balancisi pulled me aside and, you know, he showed me examples of, hey, this man's actions, good or bad, can have an effect on you. And if you approach this game the right way, you can have a positive effect on people other than yourself. And that sounds like family to me, you know. And so hook and sinker, I bit that, you know, and I took that and was able to play. And he immediately made me a running back and a cornerback. Actually enjoyed playing cornerback a lot more than running back. I didn't know how to quite read the offensive line or read defenses as a running back. So I was taking some hits, you know, my sophomore year that I wasn't quite feeling comfortable about, you know. But on defense, I didn't have to think as much, you know what I mean? I just had to cover the guy that was in front of me. If I saw the ball, go hit the ball. And that's how simple and fun the game was at that time. So, I mean, it was just, again, being a part of a team, you know, and having that opportunity that Al Balancisi presented to me is what really still lives in me now.
Stan, I read this piece about you in the Sports Illustrated archives, and there was a detail about you telling your mother that you wished you were born first in the family because you were ready to go to college when you were 8 and you wanted to be somebody. And that was when your oldest brother, Dale, was leaving to go to Kent State back in 1979. Right. What kind of impact did he have in your life with you?
Well, you know, my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, he was just the fact that he was leaving home to go to do something that was independent of you know, our upbringing was something I was intrigued by. You know, I just felt that, you know, it was a vision for me that he was going to develop into a man, you know what I mean? And, you know, I grew up in a single parent home, even though my father was very much so in my life. But, you know, growing up with my mom and watching her struggle, raise 3 boys, you know, we were taught to be men pretty early in our lives, right? So the thought process of being able to go to college, you know, was the next step to go get a job and go into manhood was something that I've always wanted to do. And my mom was the motivation, you know. I just wanted to take care of her, you know, watching her work 3 jobs and, you know, struggle, you know, really struggle raising us. I just had this burning desire to just want to take care of her. And I thought that the fastest way for me to do that was to go to college, you know. So the fact that my brother went to college before me, you know, kind of ticked me off a little bit. You know, I was ready to go be that man figure in my mind before my brother was. So he was inspiring. You know, he was an inspiration to me because he was the first to go to college in the family, and he made good with that opportunity. So I just couldn't wait for my turn.
Stan, I kind of wanted to follow up on that. You touched on, you know, watching your mom try and raise you and your brothers and how that kind of affected you. I just wonder if you could kind of expand on what the effect that, you know, seeing her struggle and still, you know, do her best to raise you guys, kind of, you know, how that affected your mindset and whatnot.
Yeah, it just made me, it made me hungry. You know, it did, you know, it just made me want to do something to make her proud. Right. And again, I just wanted to help, you know, and, you know, you get things planted in your heads, right, by your parents. Go be a doctor, go be a lawyer. You know, those were the things that you heard back in those days, right? And they just didn't sound fun, you know. But the thought of like playing sports professionally or coaching sports professionally, this was not the conversation that my mom was having with us. And but I knew I loved it. So when the opportunity came for me to be able to go to college, under the support of a sport was something that just triggered nothing but, you know, positive thoughts for me. And again, I took that and ran with it. So yeah, it was my mom and watching her and her work ethic, right? You know, and the things that she had to do and the things that she sacrificed, you know, again, going back to Al Balancisi, you know, he spoke of those same things. Like, you're going to have an unbelievable work ethic. You're going to have to make some sacrifice. And I'm like, well, I've seen my mom do that my entire life, so it just made sense. And I love what I'm doing here, playing football. And it was a thing that provided the structure that I also needed, right? It took time away and it made me become a better student, and I just saw nothing but positives from that. So yeah, that's pretty much it with that. It was very inspiring for me to have those opportunities and be able to put all that together and see the big picture of how this can really help me in the future.
Yeah, I want to take you back to Whitney Young Junior High School in Cleveland, right? You're an alternate on the 4x100, relay team because there's a guy named Desmond Howard ahead
Oh,
of
you guys do
you
your homework, man.
as an
Wow.
anchor. Then a few years later, right, you're at an invitational track meet at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame running back Rocket Ishmael's there.
Yeah.
And I read that that's when a coach nicknamed you the Bottle Rocket. What do you remember from those times? And then do you remember the name of the coach that gave you that nickname?
Yeah, it was Ken O'Keefe. Ken O'Keefe was the same person who first told me that I was a football coach, and he's unbelievable. Took on the father figure role for me while I was at Allegheny College. He was the head coach at the time. He and Joe Philbin were responsible for that whole movement, that thought process that they put in my head. I am forever grateful for those two people. But, those guys really taught me so much. They gave me a grease board and gave me a marker and said, here's how you draw a circle. You know what I mean? And here's what that line means. It was that black and white. It had to be for me. Again, I was a late bloomer, hadn't played a whole lot of ball, just watched a lot of it, enjoyed watching it and enjoyed pretending and visualizing it. But when it came down to the, schematics of it all, I was so far behind, but yeah, that Bottle Rocket name, I wasn't really receiving that very well, but what I learned from those guys, they were just constantly trying to instill confidence in me. They saw something in me, that I didn't see in myself so much. They saw this kid coming out of this urban environment, that enjoyed the game of football, that gave it everything that I had every single day. And they found a way to make that productive. They found a way to teach me how to use it for good. And they showed me that I'm going to have an opportunity to inspire others with this skill set that they were trying to make me realize that I already had. And, that is just invaluable lessons that you learn from people like that along the way that make you who you are today, for sure.
Stan, I'm gonna take you back when you were being recruited. This was before, obviously, all the rivals and the recruiting services. I wondered if you could tell us about, your recruiting story, because when you see someone who did what you did at the Division III level, you might think this guy was under recruiting or was probably too good to play. He was good enough to play up a level or two. Did you feel that way about yourself?
Not until my sophomore year in college, when I realized that I was, pretty good. Right. Became an All-American in both track and football. And it was actually my track coach, by a guy by the name of Ralph White, who was my track coach at Allegheny College, who prior to being at Allegheny was the coach at SMU, the track coach at SMU, who fell under all those violations. Now, he was a part of that, who was the Dickerson was a running back.
Eric Dickerson, yeah.
Eric Dickerson was a running back. I mean, all that craziness that was going on. They hit the death penalty. Well, he was a part of that, so when he told me that I was really a Division I type of an athlete that just so happened to be at Allegheny College, that was intriguing to me. I respected that. I hadn't been around any high level coaches, I was around high level coaches, but not coaches that have had Division I experience per se, right? He was the one person that had scholarship recruiting, had been around those guys, had coached Eric Metcalf in the long jump and things of that sort, right? So when he told me that I was a Division I athlete, I'm like, wow, and here I am playing Division III football. I'll tell you what that did for me. At one point, it had me really think, like, you're in the world of the portal nowadays, right? Guys sit there and realize that they may be better than where they are. And at that point, he almost planted the seed to have me transfer from Allegheny to give a bigger schooling opportunity, and thank God for my father, right? My father pulled me aside and said, okay, if you leave Allegheny, you make sure you find a home. And I'm like, well, what do you mean, Dad? Find a home. I do have a home. He's like, no, you committed yourself to Allegheny College and those coaches, and they've poured a lot of effort and a lot of love into you. If you leave them, you don't have a home in Ohio. And I'm like, whoa, right? So again, just the thought process that's an old school thought process. Now, when you think about that, fast forward to the thought process of kids and what they have entering this portal, right? They're looking for green grass. And I realized that my green grass was Allegheny College. I was where I was supposed to be, regardless of the accolades I was receiving. I was around good people that genuinely cared about me. I was getting a great education, right? And I had unbelievable support both on and off the football field. And if it wasn't for Allegheny College, I don't know if I'll be sitting here doing this podcast with you today, so it was really about the people. So now when you ask that question about, recruiting services and all that stuff, yeah, you really have to dig deep into not necessarily what you see all the time as far as the skill set. You got to dig deep into the mindset of the individual, right? What is it what's the end goal? All right. And then you have to really tap into, are they willing to hear, the reality of what this really is, right? Everybody thinks they want to go to the NFL until they got to go do NFL things, right? And it's hard to make that league. It is hard. All right. So, and then you look at the percentages, it's not real for 98% of the people who make it. I mean, who try to go in that league, only 2% make it, right? So no, it's all about getting around people that, genuinely have your best interest in mind, that'll keep it real with you. And it's about us as recruiters finding the perfect fit of guys that want to buy into the philosophy and the things that we're coaching and teaching here and developing the whole man here at Temple. And sometimes you got to look beyond the stars to find those things, right? To find those intangible things, those traits, so yeah, I never understood the whole star thing. I first heard that, coming to fruition by a bunch of guys who never even played the game, and you're going to give a guy a star. Are they really diving into the intangibles? Are they really diving in, or are they just digging into the skill set? Because I've been around a bunch of extremely talented individuals that, just can't get it right mentally. And they end up in the same place as the person who played Division III football at the end of the day, right? So yeah, you got to go way beyond the evaluation of what you see on tape and dig into the people.
When did you start to seriously think about coaching? Was it as simple as the story of some guys were like, it's like, okay, I'll coach once, I know I can't play anymore, or does it go back farther than that for you?
Think about coaching, it was Ken O'Keefe and Joe Philbin. And so remember, we went back to that first conversation about the seed being planted to be a doctor or lawyer. I mean, I was literally, I was an English major, political science, working on all that stuff, going to Washington, D.C., working in law firms in the summer, doing legal, paralegal type work, actually working on political campaigns and doing the grunt work. Now, I wasn't doing anything important for sure, but just working on political campaigns and stuff like that. And God, it was boring, you know what I mean? But I just had this thought process that I was going to be able to provide and take care of my mom, be a great husband, make money, right? Make enough money and all that crap. And, but it was just not fun at all, And so in the midst of studying for the LSAT, I just started coaching. Ken O'Keefe and Joe Philbin kind of brainwashed me and said, hey, while you're studying for this deal, go ahead and just help us coach the running backs. And talking about a tough situation now, I'm up here coaching guys, full time, guys that I actually were friends with and that I played with for the last 4 years. Guys that hung out at my house and we ate pizza and went to campus parties and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, they had to listen to me and do what I told them to do, and I had to hold them accountable, on a whole nother level. And that woke me up, and it woke me up because they actually listened. They actually did what I asked them to do. They trusted me. The relationship piece was there. It was strong, and they allowed me to develop them. They allowed me to make mistakes in the process of the development, and it was just a lot of that stuff that was going on, if I fast forwarded today and sitting in this chair, it's the same things that I apply to this football team today. Just keeping it real with them, being honest with the mistakes that I make right there in front of them, like really trying to harness real relationships so they can believe and trust in what I am telling them has their best interest in mind. Same stuff. So that was planned into me, right after I graduate, studying for the LSAT. And then it really became a reality when the LSAT test came around, and I had to sit down and answer that first question. And it took me 20 minutes to answer that first question. I'm like, okay, this is absolutely not what I want to do, and I answered the first question, got up, walked up out of there, and it was time to be a coach.
Stan, wanted to take you back to the day that you were hired and announced. And obviously you had so many great coaching stops along the way. Once you were done that day over in the Liacouras Center and talking to guys like us and doing the media thing, what was your next step? Do you remember what your first call was? Was it to a coach? Was it to a recruit? Because I'm always fascinated when coaches, like they prepare for the interview, they get the job, they shake some hands, and then it's like there's no time to relax. And especially if it's happening in December, you're trying to re-recruit guys that are committed or signed. There's so much to do. What do you remember what you did next that day? Like what your first coach was, what your first call was, or what your first task was after that?
I think my first call went to my mom.
Awesome.
It was the conversation of, hey, remember remember the doctor lawyer conversations, and and look at us now, and just the joy that she had to just taking part in that whole experience, to see her son, actually have an opportunity to lead a football team, right? And it was just a reflection of the next flurry of phone calls of the people who had the heaviest influences, on my life and on this process. They deserved the first call, and it was just it was a very emotional time for me. The appreciation that I had for Temple didn't come by way of expressing over a phone call. Just really just sitting down, and I can't remember where I was. Maybe I was outside of Arthur's office, kind of in the holding pattern of what the next thing they wanted me to do from a media standpoint, and just sitting down and just looking out the window and just reflecting, like, man, I really did this thing. And I vividly remember, sitting there with my wife as we're just kind of sitting in silence, just looking out the window, being chauffeured in the car going somewhere. I can't even tell you where, but just looking outside and seeing Philadelphia. And again, my wife and I both started our careers here. Her first full-time job was here in Philadelphia. My first scholarship opportunity to coach was right here in Philadelphia. We got married while we were here in Philadelphia. I proposed to her, right here in Philadelphia. And just being able to kind of reflect back on those memories, it was just amazing for us to come full circle, with this opportunity. So a lot of reflection, a lot of emotional reflection, a lot of conversation with the people who were a part of this process, heavy. And then soon after that, it was just the feeling of being overwhelmed. I'm talking about with the task at hand, right? That became a reality in a hurry. And then just hearing the needs of what this program has to mean to the community here at Philadelphia, and hearing the overwhelming, refreshingly so, hearing the overwhelming things that the president, Dr. Wingard, was experiencing, that our first aide, that Arthur Johnson, at his first opportunity to be an AD, and what he was experiencing, we were all really overwhelmed, but excited, and excited that we were somewhat aligned already. We all had the same goals. We had the same, thrive in the same fire, to get going with this with this tax that we had just thrown on our laps. And you know, so overwhelming, excited, a mix of emotions, trying to put it all together. I can't say honestly, even sitting here right now on this podcast, that I have it all together with that type of feeling and emotions. I mean, they run through every day, you know, but boy, you know, it's just a wonderful opportunity that I will not take for granted.
Stan, does some of that feeling of being overwhelmed come from the fact that, you know, I've never experienced it, you know, you have. I don't think sometimes people take into account the sacrifices that you guys make. They'll say, well, he's a football coach, he gets paid well, he's coaching a game, but you move constantly. You're never in one place, and you have gone all over the place. And it's a lot. It's a sacrifice for you. It's a sacrifice for your wife and your two daughters. To, you know, obviously you'll say, yeah, I got to come in here, I got to do a good job, but all the moving around. And when you finally get to that head coaching spot, and you would talk the day that you were hired, the day you were announced that you applied for the job and you interviewed for it when Matt got it the first time around, and you said you got some good advice from Bill Bradshaw, and then you finally get it after all that moving around. What is it like for a moment to kind of be overwhelmed like that and say, I'm a head coach now after I just moved X number of times in my life? Like, what is that process like when there's just constant change in your life with this career?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? You know, one thing I can say is I married an independent woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know, really, you know, she was making more money at my time at Villanova than I was. You know, working for IBM, eventually working for Lockheed Martin. She had her own thing going, computer engineer. You know, she was sharp. And at the same time, you know, training for the Olympics. She's a track athlete. So she herself wanted to try for an opportunity to train for the Olympics and things of that sort. So, you know, I married a girl who got it, right? Who understood what it means to set goals and really go for them, right? And we didn't stand in each other's way that way. You know, I would say the first 2 years here in Philadelphia, we were in a long distance relationship while she was still chasing her track dreams, you know, to make the Olympics. And then it just so happened to work out that she gets this job here at Philly and we're together. And we just made a promise to each other at that point that there will be no job, there will be no paycheck, you know, bigger than the love that we have for each other. You have to set that in stone. All right. If you're going to be a family man / coach, right, you got to set something that's solid, you know. And I made a promise to her that I would never chase a job for money, and I would never chase a situation, you know, that would splinter the love that we have for each other. Okay. And that held true till today. And eventually those my aspirations kind of took over. And while she's trying to be a computer engineer, you know, here in Philadelphia, and eventually I get an opportunity to go to Bowling Green, where that opportunity wasn't available for her. And within 6 months, I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where that opportunity still didn't exist for her. You know, she was willing to make the sacrifice to put her career aside to chase this dream that I had. And she found other opportunities, you know, in real estate and things that's kind of, you know, and was happy with that, right? And then a family starts coming around. My first daughter's born the year after I leave Green Bay Packers and go to Mississippi State. And then the family piece is in place, right? And, you know, and again, that conversation came up again. There is nothing that this profession is going to bring to us that is going to separate this family. If that means taking a lesser job, whatever a lesser job is perceptionally, then we're going to do that. We're just going to make every situation work for the benefit of us as a family, you know, and you got to keep that in the forefront if you're going to be a real family man in this business. And again, I just call it luck, you know, because I've seen some coaches really fail with their families in this deal, you know. But for me, you know, as jobs change and the scenery changes, the one thing that hadn't changed is my wife and my family. You know, they're there, you know, whether I'm hired or fired, they're there, you know, and I will not lose that perception.
Stan, while we're on the subject, I have to ask you, can you tell us how you met Monique and and where you proposed to her, if you want to?
She chose me, man. You know how it is? No, that's not how it was at all, right? So, I'm a GA, graduate assistant at Eastern Michigan at the time, and Eastern Michigan is where she went to school. Okay, so after leaving Allegheny, this opportunity to be a GA under Ron Cooper, all right, who's a head coach, first Black head coach at Eastern Michigan, and he decides to hire me on at Eastern Michigan because we're in the same fraternity. This is a true story, right? I go up for an interview. He sees my fraternity letters on my license plate, and without an interview, he goes, "You're hired." That's honest to goodness true. And so I'm quality control, graduate assistant at the time. They were the same thing, right? And I had just left a situation where Allegheny, where I was a football coach / track coach. Okay, and so to walk into the facility at Eastern Michigan, to the football facility at Eastern Michigan, you have to walk through the indoor track facility. Okay. And so one day I see a girl that's working on her blocks by herself early in the morning as I'm getting ready to do some work. And I go help this individual out with her starting blocks. It's not Monique, it's not my wife, but it's my wife's best friend. Okay. And I'm actually thinking, that she may be digging me or filling me out a little bit here. It was kind of awkward for me to be walking through the facility and her ask for my help, not knowing that I was actually a track coach and I actually can provide that service for her. So I would help her every now and again. And then all of a sudden it got really weird. One day I'm helping her on the track and I see this one young lady who is running intervals with the boys track team, and it is my wife. Okay, but I am like just turned on by this girl. Like, who is that girl running with the guys? Like, and she's doing it every day. I'm like, she must be some tough cookie. I mean, she must be a tough deal. She trains with the boys, not the girls, right? And I'm like, who is that? She goes, well, why do you want to know? It got real weird. I'm like, well, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I mean, to see her training with the guys. Well, next thing I know, she's hooking us up. She's connecting the dots and hooking us up and so she goes, you should try to talk to her. You should try to introduce yourself to her. It's like, I don't know her. I'm a little intimidated because she's beautiful, right? And she goes, no, go talk to her. So at a basketball game, I'm throwing some names at you now. At the time, there was a guy by the name of Earl Boykins. You guys remember Earl Boykins?
I do.
Yeah, little short point guard that played a few, years in the NBA at point guard.
Yeah,
he was a star player at Eastern Michigan, so he would just pack the stadium at Eastern Michigan. I saw my wife Monique walking around. And I said, hey, your friend Tia thought it may be a good idea for me to say hello to you, introduce myself to you. She goes, well, hi, how are you? And kind of, and just made me say more stuff. Right? I said, well, maybe you can take me, around Detroit. I knew that's where she was from. Just show me around Detroit. She said, oh, sure. So yeah, we hook up and, she shows me around Detroit and it kind of gets stale. After about a month, she disappears. And I don't hear from her for probably about, 2 months. Right. And then my birthday comes around in March and I'm in Ann Arbor, celebrating with a couple of friends. And there she is sitting at a bar with another guy. Ooh. I said, hey, what happened? I thought everything was going pretty good, and she goes, well, I knew when I met you that I was going to like you. And I knew that I was going to when I met you that you can be the one. I'm like, whoa, some heavy conversation here, right? But she was 100% right. We were the ones for each other. And we kind of had the instinct that could possibly happen even in the early days that we saw each other. And she tried to run away from it. I tracked her down and caught her a couple months later and sealed the deal, and 27 years later, man, we're still together. So
that's incredible. Sam Cohn just joined he's part of my staff. He's just joined the interview here. You'll hear from him a little bit later. It like comes at just the right time. All the deep details of Stan Drayton's life. Wait, how did you, before I turn things back over to Dante, how did you propose to her?
Yeah, so I wasn't real creative with that, right? But you know, it's one of those New Year Eves, you know, deals. You know, I actually bought the ring, probably the cheapest diamond ring you can buy in the diamond districts right downtown here in Philly. You know, scrapping up pennies to get this thing, right?
Mhm.
And so we go to a New Year's Eve party down here in Philly, and right at midnight, I dropped on the knee and proposed to her right on the dance floor. You know, and
That's
she didn't
good.
say,
That's a
yeah,
good
yeah,
story.
yeah. She didn't say yes right away. I think she was kind of caught off guard by it, and I think she was scared.
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, is this a yes?" She goes, "It's absolutely a yes." And but here's the deal, right? You know, I talk an independent woman. You know, we were engaged for 4 years prior to getting married.
Mhm.
You know, we just wanted to make sure it was right. You know, our lifestyles were changing. You know, all that stuff was going on. She was still chasing her career. So we were engaged for 4 years prior to us really, you know, tying a knot.
That's awesome.
Stan, I don't mean to interrupt. This has movie script. This movie script writes itself.
Oh man, I'll be a terrible actor, man. You gotta go get Denzel Washington for this deal.
If they make a movie about how you met your wife and the proposal story and first meeting at the track, who plays you in the movie?
Man, you
Do they get a
know,
young Michael B. Jordan to come out and play you at the track, helping someone else? Like who
I'm
plays you
kind
in
of
that
old
movie?
school. I'm kind of old school, man. You got to go ahead and you know, get Denzel Washington to get that gray out of his hair. You know, maybe do some computer, you know, adjustments to the way
Some
he looks.
CGI to have
Yeah,
Denzel
you
play.
know what I
That's
mean. I don't know
awesome.
too many of the young guys, but no, it was a special connection. It really was.
Stan, this has been a lot of fun, and we appreciate your time. I thought I would end this real quick with a few like fun, rapid fire questions for you about stuff off the field. Give us your favorite song.
Oh wow, He Loves Me by Jill Scott.
That's
You
good.
guys know who Jill Scott
Yes,
is?
we do. Good choice there. Good Philadelphia choice. Jill Scott.
Yeah, well, and it's real. You know, again, one of those stories for the movie, right? Jill Scott made her first album, all right, in 2000, the year that my wife and I got married, and we got married in St. Thomas on a cruise boat, and was struggling to find a non-traditional wedding song, and that was the song that my wife walked down to. He Loves Me by Jill Scott.
That's awesome. How about your favorite food? If you had like, if somebody said to you, "This is going to be your last meal," what would you eat?
Man, ribs. Barbecue ribs, and I say that, and I'm laughing because I'm a vegan, you know, and I hadn't had ribs in years, you know what I mean? But I still love ribs, man. But I can't eat them.
What would happen if you tried to like sneak some and your wife found out? Would you get in trouble?
You know, I'm not gonna sneak them because of what it does to the body.
There we go.
It'll have me curled over, man. So I can't sneak a rib right now.
How about do you remember what your first concert was?
Yeah, it was the Run DMC. What was the name of that concert? Run DMC, LL Cool J. I can't remember. Gosh, dog. Yeah, but it was Run DMC, LL Cool J, MC Light. That concert. It was their first hip hop tour, and that was my first concert there. It was big time.
That's a crazy lineup.
Yeah, it's a great lineup.
Yeah.
One last question. We like asking people about this because you get so many football questions. Is there something that people wouldn't know about you, or something that you don't get the chance to talk about because you're always talking football, or something that you would want people to know that they don't know about you?
Wow, that I don't want people to know is the critical thing. No, you know, I'm an avid biker. All right, I love riding bikes. I'm a road bike guy. I mean, I'm talking the helmet, the tights, you know, all of that stuff. The tights got to have the butt pad on it and the whole deal, you know. So, you know, that's funny. It's funny to people who, when they see me in that moment, how serious I am when I'm riding that bike. But I'll ride, you know, 50 to 100 miles on a bike, you know, and people don't know that about me. Not that I care that people know that about me, but you know. But one thing I will say that I do unselfishly is that I do love people, and I love helping people, and I love diving into tough situations, you know, when there's cameras not watching, and helping a situation get better than what it is currently. So I mean, I do love that.
Dan, this was great. Thanks again so much for your time, and you'll have some plenty of biking trails to explore in
Yeah.
Philly, so it's a good city for that. But yeah, thanks again so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Go Owls.
So some great stuff there from Stan Drayton. Like we said, that's just part of the conversation that we had with Stan. Again, if you are subscribed to Owl Scoop or you plan on subscribing to Owl Scoop in the future, you'll be hearing some other pieces of the conversation, of some more detailed stuff about the team itself. But there you heard him, just telling us some great anecdotes about what got him into coaching and how important his mother was to him, his brother. Now you know a little bit more about Jafar Williams and Marvin Clastor and why Stan hired them. Guys, your reaction from the conversation, even if it's just a couple of snippets about stuff that people can listen to once they subscribe or once they're on the site.
I can take it first. I think the one thing that really stood out to me, and this is more speaking in whole about our conversation. One thing that stood out in the few times we've heard from him and talked to him, and from other people have said about him, he's just a really genuine guy. And he says a lot of the right things. Of course, I think we had mentioned like somewhere in the conversation that you don't get everything about the team until spring ball. They haven't played a single game under Stan Drayton, but he says a lot of the right things. And I kept thinking towards the end of our conversation, you could play a drinking game and take a shot every time he comes back to his philosophy and the importance of, you'd be hammered, but he's very grounded in his philosophy and the importance of building and reestablishing and creating culture at Temple. The part that you just heard during the podcast about his upbringing and kind of how he got into football, I think was really the foundation for that. But for Stan Drayton, it sounds like he is so deeply rooted in philosophically how he wants to build Temple football, which is, if you're a Temple football fan, if you're a fan of Temple and you want to see them succeed, that's all you can ask for right now.
Yeah, just echoing everything that Sam said. If you're like me and you really like to dig into like the football stuff, like John said, like subscribe and you can listen to the whole thing. We, kind of a lot of that football stuff is going to be there, and that's the part that I enjoy. But like just hearing from Stan, he, like Sam said, I think like genuine is probably the best word to use to describe him. He says all the right things, and coaches obviously have coaches speak, and we hear that a lot, but this is going to sound, really almost dumb, but like, I really believe Stan Drayton when he says this stuff. Like, I don't think it's him trying to be a proper coach. Like, I think it's really him. And I think that it's important to make that distinction. And I think that he really, he talks a lot about, his upbringing and the part that you guys just heard and how that kind of pushed him to coaching. And then, in the later part, right, he talks about like the holistic development of student athletes, and that was kind of the theme of the back half, and you can listen to that if you subscribe to the site. And I think that he carries that, and he just seems like a really genuine guy. He really cares about these kids and about what they're going to do after football. And I think that that's obviously it's not the sexy offensive scheme, defensive scheme talk, but it matters for this program and the kids that are on the team right now. And I think it's all good stuff. Like Sam said, if you're a Temple fan, I think this is a genuine head coach. This is a guy who really, really cares about developing young men. And I think that's a part that gets lost in the shuffle of day-to-day football talk. And that seems to be on the forefront of his mind.
And I think he at least seems to get how you need to recruit and how you should recruit at Temple. And obviously he's been able to recruit a very high level player. When Caden asked him about, his recruiting story, and being at Allegheny College and then having the career that he had there, some people might say, man, maybe this guy was under recruited. And then he told that great story about how, you're looking for greener grass, and my grass was right at Allegheny College, and talked about why he stayed there. But then he turned that into that conversation about stars and how I never really truly understood that. And again, so many coaches can say, this is a developmental program, whether we're here, there, or anywhere, whether we're at Alabama or LSU, but at Temple, you do really need to embrace that. Like we said, they've gotten a small handful of 4-star players over the years, and none of them have really played out or panned out. A couple of them didn't even remain on the roster. And the one that did, Karamo Diabate, was a rotational defensive line player. And it's really been, if you're looking at stars, the 2-star guys and the 3-star guys. So it does seem that Stan's vision aligns with, what works, what has worked for Temple in the past. And the rapid fire stuff was fun. Him talking about being an avid biker and how his last meal, he'd love to have ribs, but he can't because he's a vegan. He would be doubled over in pain, which reminded me, Sam, of how you talk about what would happen to you if you had too much gluten in your diet. And
if Stan and I hung out, I would eat gluten, he would eat ribs, and we would just have a terrible time together. I hope that's not actually what happened. I hope if Stan and I hang out, we choose a different activity, maybe go for a bike ride together or something other than eating food that we can't eat. But it's fun to think about, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, big thank you to Stan for carving out as much time as he did for us. And again, you'll be able to hear the other pieces of that interview at owlscoop.com. And again, if you're not subscribed already, I would strongly suggest it. Again, a lot of great insight into, just other parts of the program about single digit stuff, his philosophy on how they're going to handle hitting and tackling in practice. I combined the two words. And just, a lot of good stuff that you'll hear in the other segments about Everett Withers, his chief of staff, who really ended up having, a strong influence in his hires. And Stan gave us a lot of good insight there. But again, a lot of good stuff that you won't hear on the pod, beyond the pod. I would definitely recommend it. A lot of cool stuff there. We did promise you some basketball content. Again, we're recording this before Temple takes on SMU. Sam, do we know? Again, once people listen to this, it's going to be outdated information. Are Jeremiah and Damian Dunn still game time decisions heading into tonight?
Game time decisions, but Jeremiah has not practiced, and Dame tried to practice but couldn't do anything in full. So people are going to know this is a moot point because people are going to know this, but my assumption is that neither of them they're probably not going to play. Aaron said he's hopeful for Dame a little bit more just because it's a later game, so maybe he'll feel a little bit better later in the day. But he tried to practice and he was feeling pretty sore, so he didn't make it sound like they were both likely to play, but listed as game time decisions.
Yeah. So again, as we're sitting here now, Temple is sitting at 13-9 overall, 6-5 in the American after that 92-83 overtime loss at Tulane on Saturday. Of course, they've been without Caleb Battle since early December. He's out with a season-ending injury. No Jeremiah Williams after the shoulder injury at USF, and no Damian Dunn. Zach Hicks had 21 in that game. Quincy Adams-McCoy had a career high 15. Zach, of course, was late in getting over to Jalen Forbes, who tied it with a 3 with about 2 seconds left in overtime. And then Forbes scored 9 more points of his 25. And that's ultimately what sunk him there. So again, not recognizing Forbes there cost him, and would have been a nice win for him. Again, it's Tulane. It's not a great team, but would have been a heck of a win nonetheless on the road. Guys, just some general impressions from that game before we head into the 3 mailbag questions here. Again, I don't know. Aaron's not big on moral victories, and you certainly don't want to talk about Tulane as a moral victory or anywhere in that conversation. But I don't know. If you're playing Quincy Adams-McCoy that many minutes and you're without really your 3 leading scorers, there was a lot to like in that game. Obviously, the defensive lapse at the end. But what did you think about it?
First thing that comes to mind, again, there are no moral victories, especially against Tulane. But from what you saw in that game, I was shocked. Mm-hmm. They were offensively. Defensively, they were solid at times. They still had Jaleel White on the floor. Ty Strickland still can be a really solid defender for them off the bench. Offensively, I thought they were going to be an absolute train wreck for 40 minutes. I thought it was going to be atrocious because of how much they lean on Jeremiah Williams to run the show. Hyser Miller played 39 minutes. Granted, overtime helped his minutes a little bit there, but that's the most he's ever played. That was his first start. SMU is likely going to be his second start. He's really come along, and I asked Aaron about this the other day. He said that he's not afraid of the moment. That's really where he's become a lot more poised. He's grown with his ability to be able to run a team, be able to run that position. And it seems like he's a little bit ahead of where they thought he might be. He's essentially Jeremiah Williams last year right now. He's really kind of getting thrown in the fire. They tried to ease him in a lot of this season. Now he's just getting thrown into the fire as their starting point guard. Not quite as drastic as it was for Jeremiah starting on day one, but he's really getting thrown in the fire, and he's really running the show a lot now. Obviously, him and Ty split some of that responsibility, but offensively, I thought there were some pretty bad turnovers. It felt like the same pass every time. They just kept turning the ball over, but offensively, they were much better. Again, not great, but much better than I thought they would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add, and I know Temple fans probably don't want to hear this, but I think, we'll be sitting down and having these conversations next year. And I think you'll hear Aaron say, like, obviously it's not the way we wanted it to happen, but it was good that some of these guys got this experience and it allowed them to grow. You assume that, the leading scorers come back and everyone's healthy next year. I mean, having a Heiser Miller with a lot of experience, capable of coming off the bench and giving you good minutes as a backup point is huge. Maybe Zach works his way into the starting lineup, or maybe he's another guy off the bench. I mean, I think it's good experience. I think if you are looking at it from the bright side, I agree with Sam. I was very surprised that they scored that many points. Just putting it simply, I was not expecting them to score 80 plus points in regulation, given who they were rolling out there. So again, I know it's not what Temple fans want to hear, especially, the way that this season was trending. It looked like this team was really starting to find their groove, and Damian and Jeremiah were kind of really stepping into their roles. And, I'm not saying they can't get it back if those guys come back and continue to perform well, but, we might be sitting here having this conversation next year and go, you know what? Not the way that anyone wanted it to happen, but maybe it was good they got all those minutes. Maybe it was good they got all that experience. They can be really, big time contributors off the bench, just making them stronger. Again, that's just the optimistic view of it.
Zach Hicks almost pulled a Brendan Barry in overtime, and towards the end, he started knocking down a couple of shots in conference conference tournament Brendan Barry fashion. So
Sam, what was your? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you got it.
Say, what was your view of what happened when they, on the three that forced overtime, when they lost Forbes and Zach was out there? What was your view of what went down there? I know we're really like microscopically breaking down a play that's like 2 games old now, but I know it was a conversation piece over the weekend. What was your view of what happened there?
Yeah, so we had talked about this a little bit in our group chat. The way I saw it and the way that Aaron explained it post game, Aaron had said that there was no conversation of fouling, went down 3 with 10 seconds left, which is up for debate. If you're, just someone that likes basketball, there are people on both sides of the aisle of whether they think that's the right move. Doesn't matter. His philosophy was to go out there with 10 seconds. He was confident in the way they were playing defense. Just switch on everything. So Tulane brings the ball down, and I guess they brought a fake screen and then to flare onto a 3. So they brought the screener knowing that Temple's been switching pretty much the entire game, with the hope that if they bring the guy, if they bring the screener, they're going to switch. They're going to get caught up when he flares, and maybe it'll essentially exactly what happened is they'll either run into each other or there'll be some kind of miscommunication. So they bring a fake screen. Forbes pops out to the 3-point line. And then because Zach and I think it was Ty Strickland are both under the impression that if they use the screener, we're going to switch. There was a miscommunication to what was happening. Zach is half a step slow. Parlay that with the fact that he's not the best lateral defender. He's got long arms, which helped him get a little bit closer, but he's not the best at moving laterally in a situation like that. And he was half a step behind. So to me, that was a very minor miscommunication that put him half a step behind. It was a nice play call by Tulane, and it worked out well for them. But that's what I saw is when they bring a fake screen, they flare the guy out to the 3-point line, that Ty and Zach had a half second of miscommunication, and he was just a step slow in recovering through that.
So we do have 3 basketball related mailbag questions to close things out here. First 2 come from the message board, from our basketball message board at owlscoop.com. The third one comes from Twitter here. So the first one, the screen name is Berkshire Owl. Question is, assuming Damian Dunn and Jeremiah Williams get healthy for the American Athletic Conference tournament, what do you all think about their prospects for the tournament?
Very different than what their prospects would be if they don't have Damian Dunn and Jeremiah Williams. I think it's a totally different conversation.
So I think it's a very big assumption that they're both going to be healthy.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll say plainly, like if they're healthy, I think anything is possible with this team. They've shown a lot of grittiness. They've shown that they can close out games. I think they're still, as of like a week or so ago, they had the most wins in the conference by 5 points or fewer. They've been the best team in the conference at closing out games, closing out close games in clutch situations. They've since lost like the last 3 of those. So without Damian Dunn and Jeremiah Williams, you're losing huge pieces of your offense, both a scorer, a facilitator, and a secondary scorer in those 2 guys. So if we're being honest, without them, I could see them losing on day 1, depending on their matchup. Maybe they fall out of the first round bye section of the top 5 of the conference, and they lose on day 1 if they don't have their. Temple's done crazier things. They could get out of whatever, but without them, that's kind of where I see them. With them, they probably, with the end of their schedule, depending on how much these 2 guys play, they're kind of on the fringe of getting that first round bye. I think if they're healthy, there's at least a possibility that they could do something interesting and make a run.
Kyle, Dante?
I mean, I agree with Sam. I think that obviously if they are healthy, I think this team maybe can win a couple of games. But if they're not, I find it hard to believe that they're going to get out of that day 1 scenario. If those guys don't play the rest of the year, they probably don't finish in the top 5 given their schedule. They play some of the best teams in the American to close it out. So I would assuming that they will be playing on day 1. And if those guys aren't healthy, I am a betting man, I probably would not take that bet. So if they're back though, who knows? They've gritted out some tough games this year. They might be able to do it again in the tournament, obviously. But again, how rusty are Jeremiah and Damian? Have they played recently? Basketball rust can take a little bit to knock off, kind of takes you a minute to get back to the speed of the game. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the question as is, assuming Dunn and Williams get healthy, I mean, okay, let's say Damian Dunn and Jeremiah Williams get healthy. Yeah, could they get to the conference championship game depending on how things are bracketed out? Yeah, why not? But I think what would ultimately stop them, even with the healthy Jeremiah Williams and a healthy Damian Dunn, is they still just don't have anybody that they can throw the ball to in the post if people aren't hitting shots. I realize that you could maybe that guy is Nick Jourdain, whether you post him up in the paint, whether you post him up kind of near the top of the key and he turns and shoots there, you'd have to look to him there. But I think that would be the thing for me, where they fall a little short against somebody like Houston. But I don't know, stranger things have happened.
Yeah, John, to your point, just to get back to like answering the actual question, because we don't want to stray too far from it. If they're both healthy, if the 2 of them had never gotten hurt in these final 6 games, they're playing, the 4 of those games are against the top 4 teams in the conference, all 9-win teams. They probably split their last 6. Maybe they're around a 16-win team. Maybe they squeak out the 5 seed. Maybe they get a first round bye in the conference tournament. Maybe they get a favorable matchup. And I think there's a legitimate chance that they could be there day 2, day 3, whatever. They could make a legitimate run. But without them, I think it's very hard to make the argument, because their schedule is tough. If they can't close out these last couple of games and close out some wins, they're not going to get a great seed. They're going to have a really tough first round matchup, and it's hard to imagine a Temple team without those 2 guys making any kind of run, especially with a tough first round matchup.
2 more questions here. This one from the message board from the screen name Tiger Owl. Given that Tulane is about as young as Temple, will these 2 teams be the top American Athletic Conference teams in the future? A Ron Hunter versus Aaron McKie rivalry would be fun.
Sure, if SMU and Houston and Cincinnati all just major collapses.
If Tulane's 2 bandage guards don't just decide to leave and go to a real program.
Exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't exactly say that Ron Hunter has been. Look, everybody's using the portal, and kudos to them for scraping together a few more wins here. But about as young as Temple, like Kyle said, they brought in a couple of transfers, and good for them. But who's to say that they're gonna stick around? I think that
if I'm a 20-point-a-game guy, like the name who the Tulane guard's name is blank for me, the guy that scores 20 points a game, the transfer from LSU, I'm probably just declaring. Like, even if I'm not going to the NBA, the G League is a more viable option than it's ever been. I'm probably not sticking around New Orleans for another year.
Yeah. Final question here to close things out is from Twitter. The Twitter handle is at Temple Fan Al. At full strength, can this team be the best team in the conference next year?
Can they? Why not? Will they? Probably not. I think we've had this conversation so much throughout the season that this team at full strength, playing their best basketball, basketball is one of the best teams in the conference. They're not at the level Houston is. They're probably not even really at the level SMU is at, but I think you could argue they're better than Cincinnati, and they're better than Tulane. They're better than Wichita State. So a team that was at one point the third best team in the conference and gave SMU a good fight. I very much think they're at full strength at their best basketball. They're a top 3 team in the conference, but the difference between Houston to SMU to Temple is a little bit larger than I think people might want to think, or might want.
Anybody that is sitting here on February 16th and is telling you they have any idea what Temple's roster looks like next year is being disingenuous with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 2022, where even when you're projecting, okay, you think 1 or 2 guys are going to leave, that could easily become 3 or 4. Not that I've heard literally anything, but if I'm Heisier Miller, maybe it's possible that I go, okay, do I still want to sit behind these guys for another year or 2 years? Like that could apply to a lot of different people. If I'm Zach Hicks, do I still want to come off the bench for another year? Do I see a starting spot coming out? If I'm a big that's currently playing on Butler, do I want to transfer into Temple? Like, there's so many ifs that, like, yeah, it's possible. It's also possible that they have an exodus they don't expect, and then all of a sudden we're projecting roles for guys that might be playing for St. Bonaventure next year. Like,
well, that's a tricky thing, because again, I think that again they are what they are right now. Again, heading into tonight's game, they are 13-9, 6-5 in the league. We don't want to overrepresent what they are, but Aaron and his staff have done a good job of retaining the guys that they wanted to retain. With all due respect to Dre Perry, who's out for the year, JP Mormon, guys like that, they were kind of fine to see them walk. They kept the guys they wanted to keep. Now it's another year of, like Kyle said, making sure that you can continue to recruit and keep the guys that you want to keep. It would be devastating for them to see a Zach Hicks go. Really anybody on the roster, short of, maybe an Arashma Parks or someone like that. But yeah, there's a lot to be said, as Kyle said, about how things are going to shake out with the roster. If things stay relatively the same, again, unless Emmanuel Akpomo makes a huge leap, you gotta, for me to say they're going to be the best team in the league, they have to go get a competent big. And as we've talked about before, it's not that easy anymore. You don't just get maybe the top big at a low major program, because even those guys are getting big time offers. So I like the question. It's a good one. I think they can be one of the top teams in the league, as Sam said, but the best one, I need to see a big and maybe another shooter off the bench.
And a handful of these guys taking a step forward.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When does all the teams leave for the Big 12? That is not
a very fair question. Houston's still going to be there.
Yeah. When is Houston and Cincinnati and all that? When they leave, I will be willing to indulge this conversation like legitimately. But until then, I think Temple has a couple pegs to climb on the ladder still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
for sure.
Good stuff, Sam. Thank you. That'll do it for this week. Big thank you to Stan Drayton for joining us, and thank you to all of you for continuing to listen to The Scoop and for subscribing. Have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you guys next week.